Hi and welcome to the Lightleaders, a podcast for lightworkers and conscious entrepreneurs who are passionate about raising the consciousness of our planet and take action to make it happen. I'm your host, Alexis Lember, and I believe that we are currently in the middle of a global awakening of humanity, that right now is the time for heart-centered conscious people to step into our power so we can replace the old paradigm and bring the conscious new earth into manifestation. So here, I'll interview a variety of people who lead this movement of creating this new earth, whether they do it through a meditation course, a conscious podcast, or an ethical cryptocurrency. I call them light leaders. If you resonate with our mission, please help us spread the message by sharing this podcast. We're having more and more content getting censored, so we need your help. Make sure to stay in touch also by registering to our newsletter on thelightleaders.org. If you hear little nuggets you love and you'd like to share, screenshot this episode and share on your Instagram stories, make sure to tag us at the Lightleaders podcast and we will repost. Hey, there's a project I'm super passionate about. It's called the Lightleaders Mastermind. We're looking for people who really want to create better systems for the new Earth and see blockchain, cryptocurrencies and decentralized technologies as a great way to do it. More concretely, we'll have a few mastermind events with top guest speakers, and we'll create a group of like-minded people to build those new foundations. We want people who are passionate about the values around sovereignty and freedom and who are also capable and solution-driven. So if that sounds like you, I invite you to get more information on thelightleaders.org/mastermind. We also have a free Telegram group that you'll find there where you can get more info. Hi, and welcome to this new episode of The Light Leaders. Today I'm with Rieki Cordon, whose purpose is to create a world worth passing off to his children. And this exploration started with permaculture and ecovillages and has led you to cryptocurrencies and regenerative economic systems. The realization that economy is very important to you led you to focus on Seeds and IFA, which are two organizations living in the Web 3.0 and focused on providing tools to create the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. Thank you, Rieki, for being here. And to give a bit of context, we've had Nicholas Hager on this show. It was about 4 or 5 months ago, talking about Seeds and HIFA. And we had a really great conversation. I'm super excited to have you. We're going to talk about, of course, Seeds and HIFA also, but more generally, I'm excited to have you because you've been working on creating eco-villages, communities that work. And I think your discoveries and your exploration can be very valuable to our listeners or people like me who are more new to building intentional communities and understanding what are the right systems to use them. How can we leverage cryptocurrencies also, for example? So thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure.
My first question to you, Rieki.
Sure.
What are you grateful for today?
This one was actually alchemized recently with some of the practices we were doing just now. It was chaos. I mean, there's a lot going on in the world, and especially what's happening in Seeds and HIFA and everything I'm a part of. We're in this kind of transitionary phase, and it's enormous complexity and wild, and there's a lot of energy and passion and chaos and drama kind of all happening at once. So that was weighing down pretty heavily on me coming here, but and the meditation we were just doing, I actually realized how grateful I am for that, because the alternative is nothing, that there isn't passion, there isn't energy wanting to make a shift happen. So currently I'm really grateful that there's so many people wanting to make this change, really passionate about, building a more beautiful world, and are really dedicated toward doing that. Yes, that could look like drama and passion and infighting, but that just means people care. So I'm really grateful for, all the beautiful people that care. And yeah.
Thanks. And do you want to share a bit more about, quickly, but for people to understand what seeds and HIFA are? And again, people can also listen to the podcast I did with Nicholas Hager, number 111, where we dived a bit into it. But as a recap.
Sure. Might be helpful just to, paint the story. About a decade ago, as probably everyone listening to this podcast, realized that civilization, where it's heading and how it currently works, is broken. It doesn't create the conditions for thrivability. Like, most people are in some form of either indentured servitude or depression and anxiety, and these things are just growing and getting worse. So sitting with that understanding, I didn't want to have kids. A big part of me didn't even want to live in this world, and I didn't know what to do or where to go, and I was incredibly depressed myself. This is when I was first learning about, intentional communities and permaculture as a solution. But it was also a kind of a running away. I only came to this later, but it was an energy of trying to exit. I saw the world collapsing, and this was like, hey, we can run away. We'll create our own little island of a beautiful community. And if the whole world collapses, that's fine, because we're going to grow our own food. And, maybe we'll stockpile bullets and batteries and everything else too. Like, it was a lot of that energy. So that's where I started. And we actually, a bunch of friends of mine, we bought up 26 acres of rainforest property in Central America and started planting our own trees. And we were going to do it. We were going to have an eco-village, and we were going to live sustainably, and we were going to show the way, right?
Which is probably what a lot of people think about doing at the moment.
I mean, it makes sense. I think it's an innate desire in us. I mean, we're tribal people. We want to live in community, and we lost that. I mean, community has been shattered. And there's one perspective that was intentional, that we intentionally destroyed community so it was easier to control people. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that almost everyone I talk to, they want to live in community. They want a deeper relationship with the people they're around. They want more purpose and meaning, and
with the planet too.
And local food, man. I mean, I'm addicted to food. I love it, but I love the experience of picking a berry right from a bush and putting it in my mouth, like plant to mouth. Like, it doesn't get better than that. This is a little bit of a tangent, but there's it's called biophotons. It's the energy that plants and all living beings actually put off, and you can take pictures of it and actually see the energy coming off. Some people call it chakras or whatever. But all plants put this off too. But within 3 hours or 4 hours of picking a plant from its source, it doesn't put off this energy anymore. So this is a vital source of energy that we're no longer getting because it's let out. But throughout most of evolution and our time on this planet, we lived plant to mouth. We went to a bush, we saw a berry, we ate it. We didn't take that berry, pick it early from the bush, put it in a box, ship it halfway around the world, put it on a shelf for 2 weeks, and then somebody ate it, So it's like we're not even getting that vitality from our food anymore. And that's so critical to like reestablish that relationship with our food, and beyond just the nutritional aspects, but, a deeper relationship, getting to know your food, getting to know the plants that you're connecting with. I mean, they're alive. They have a consciousness too. They're aware. And if we can establish relationships with them, they can create food that's healthier for us. I mean, even if you want to look at it from an evolutionary perspective, they want that. They want you to be healthy so that you continue to eat them and spread their seed. So that makes sense.
Personal question on that. Could you manage in Bali to live with that lifestyle and big things?
Everywhere I go, I plant a garden. Like, it's my first thing I do when I get a house. And right now we've actually been carrying like planter boxes because we've been moving so much. So we just carry our garden with us house to house. Wow. It's a little bit weird because it's not the same if the plants aren't growing in the earth and having that connection with, the fungi and the mycelial networks and everything that's alive. So I don't recommend planter boxes, but that's my next move right now is my wife and I just found out we're going to be having some children here soon.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, that's probably another story, but yeah, so it's all about finding home, to be able to have a garden, to raise them, to having a relationship with their food too. And the first thing I do every morning I wake up is go check on the plants and how they're doing, and if that fruit's ripe yet and what new flowers there are. And it's an experience, and it's beautiful. Yeah. Anyway, that was kind of a tangent, So yeah, we bought up the land. We're trying to do an eco-village for all the right reasons. It failed. I mean, we couldn't actually own the land, and it was a scam. So that's where I shifted to, like, okay, well, how do you actually do this right? So then I just started visiting other eco-villages and learning what they did. And, the biggest thing is, how do you coordinate? How do you make decisions together? Because
was that a problem in that community too?
We didn't get mature enough for that to actually be a problem. So we were still in the early stages, like the honeymoon stage, where you don't have that tension yet. When we found out we couldn't own the land, and then we abandoned the project because because in the 60s, 70s, where the whole intentional community thing really kicked off, at least in the States, a lot of the energy was, anarchism. It was, resisting the authority and wanting to go somewhere else. So it was a really anti-government in any type of form kind of drive. The problem with that, though, is if you don't want any structure and if you don't want any governance, then it makes it very difficult for people to make decisions together and collaborate and coordinate and do anything effective. So most of them failed. Intentional communities have like a 95% failure rate. And it doesn't surprise me either, because even the word community is so loaded. If I tell, okay, this is true, anyone I ask what community means to them, I'm going to get a different answer. And that's the problem, because if you say we're going to create an intentional community and 50 people show up to do that, well, you have 50 different impressions of what that means. You can imagine, if I pull out Monopoly to play Monopoly and you pass Go and, you hand me a Go Fish card, I'm going to be like, what the heck, man? Like, we're playing Monopoly, give me money. You're like, no, I'm playing Go Fish. That's going to create tensions. So when people come together to create something, but they're playing different games, it's the foundational problem. Like, the biggest reasons why most of them fail is they're not having a same, game guide of how we actually do this. So that was the next part of my journey, is, uncovering what pieces of that guide are important. What's the patterns of successful eco-villages? Like, what did they generally do? One more tangent there is the one thing I learned about eco-villages is every single one of them did something new. Every book on how to do an eco-village is different. And so the pattern is that it's, the pattern that sticks is a group of people coming together and then figuring out what culture works for them. And there's a pattern to figure out what that culture actually looks like. But that's the thing that actually works, is not a blueprint that do exactly this, but it's a process to, this is how you learn how you might want to do things, and then going through that process together and then being very intentional about that process. And that's what I think is the kind of the key takeaway of how you might set up a successful eco-village.
But since then, you haven't been living in eco-villages, right?
I did for the first year and a half as we were going and visiting a whole bunch, but then after that, no, it was weird.
Did you apply the learning more to the online world and decentralized organizations?
Yeah, that learning applies for any group of people wanting to come together and to do anything. So whether it's a company or a business or a village, a neighborhood, whatever.
A country.
Bottom up, yes. So eventually, I don't see this working top down with the current countries and nation states, though. So, so I can paint the rest of the thread here. So, going through, seeing what eco-villages work, what doesn't, we created this blueprint called Our Neighbor Good. So we got rid of the community word altogether, and we're just thinking like, hey, how do you build a beautiful neighborhood? So this could be a pattern for, suburbia to turn around and build eco-villages right in place. So they don't have to move to, Central America and buy a rainforest land to build an eco-village. Like, turn your lawns into food forests, knock down your fences and create community where you're at right now. Like, you can do that. If you're living in a high-rise building in New York, great, connect your apartments, and you can build community wherever you're at if you follow this pattern, right? Well, and other patterns. So that's where I was at, and we were still looking for land. And I met a friend who was building a peer-to-peer food platform. It was grow food, not lawns, cook food out of your house, sell it to your neighbors. Like, it's a beautiful idea. We need to do this. But if there's any like Web 2, and I say that if there's any extractive platform that's doing peer-to-peer food, meaning if there's a platform taking a fee for two people to interact on a local food platform, it's not going to scale. I'll look at it and be like, Bob across the street selling a pie. I'll walk over there and be like, hey, Bob, you're selling a pie. Here's $5. I'm not going to use the platform and pay him 10% to do it. All right. And that's what happened. A lot of, peer-to-peer food platforms were set up and they all failed because they couldn't scale. People were circumnavigating it. Right. I got into Bitcoin back in like 2011. I was trolling Reddit.
I would add that even if they succeeded, they'd probably become that big third party that starts to impose their own rules.
Which, yeah, is antithetical of what we're trying to create, right? Is we don't want another monolithic organization dominating how we get our food, right? So it's kind of the opposite of peer-to-peer food, which again is why I don't think any of these have really worked. I mean, yes, I got into Bitcoin a pretty long time ago just because I was very rebellious. 2011.
Oh, yeah.
I was learning about banking systems at the time and Federal Reserve and Rothschilds and all of those rabbit holes I'm sure you've all been down. And that's what kind of led to like, okay, we need an alternative. It didn't take me long in Bitcoin though. I started mining in the early days when like a 3G graphics card actually worked. But it didn't take long to figure out this isn't actually the Renaissance. This is a revolution. Like instead of bankers, we have miners that are controlling the whole system. Instead of, the wizards on Wall Street manipulating everything, now it's the tech geeks that are the new, elite class. It didn't create that egalitarianism. It just created a new story of the same thing, which is what a revolution's all about. It's revolving, It's it's restructuring who owns the power, but within the same paradigm. So I kind of saw that early on, and I got a little disheartened of Bitcoin and probably left in 2014. Also, Mt. Gox happened, and I lost a whole bunch of money at the time, and it was just whatever. But I still stayed with it, and it was a side hobby I had. So a lot of people knew that about me. And my friend who was building this peer-to-peer food platform, he approached me. He's like, hey, do we put cryptocurrency to this? And this was 2016. It's kind of the start of the whole ICO boom where people are throwing blockchain on everything just because. And so my initial reaction to him was like, no, we don't put a crypto on this. That's not a solution for everything. But he planted a nice seed of an idea. And maybe a month later, I was in ceremony and I was doing this breathwork practice and I saw this like expansion and contraction of a money supply. I know it's weird. But it just all of a sudden it kind of clicked to me that it's like, wait, no, we can build a financial system based off a local food system. And now instead of that platform charging fees to have people interact, that platform could be better than free. Central banks made $20 trillion, actually more than that recently. It's an enormous amount of money. Like, what if that money, instead of going to bail out Wall Street, what if that went to local food systems to subsidize local food, making it better, faster, cheaper? Like, we need to be doing that. Why wasn't that money going to fund the solutions rather than funding the problems like it's doing? We spent $4.5 trillion in a single year making oil and gas cheaper than renewable energy. Like, we're subsidizing all the things destroying our planet rather than the things healing them, right? It's bonkers. But if we created our own financial system, we could subsidize the solution. So it's like, oh, cool. Well, we can have a currency backed by local food and people know they can buy food with it, which was the other thing crypto wasn't doing very good at, is people would get it. They're like, what can I do with this? It's like, well, hold on to it, speculate, number go up. But if we have this new currency, it was like, well, what can I do with this? Well, you can buy regenerative local food and you can always buy dinner with it. Like, that's a more firm foundation to build a financial system on top of. So that's what kind of pulled me back into crypto.
Which is kind of what I'm often asking you or Nick or the people at Seeds, which is when can I buy my cacao at Zest with Seeds?
At Zest, I don't know. As soon as someone goes and talks to Zest and do it. But in Central America, this is happening all over the place. So I've already bought cacao with Seeds. And they shipped it from Central America. Not super sustainable, but moving to Central America, so it'll happen there. But yeah, I mean, it's decentralized, it's open, so it's requiring people on the ground to be communities and kind of spread it. And right now, there's pockets all across the world that are doing this. Bali's not super active with it though.
Okay, yeah, and I saw a bit in the timeline. You had a really interesting phase of first is expansion or like increase of value of the currency, and then using it as a real stable coin, like, because what we call stable coin today, they're pegged to the dollar, so they're actually not stable. They're doing something that's more like a real stable coin, because I feel that that's also something we need if we want to use cryptos on a day-to-day basis, is to, if it increases in value, it's great as an investor, but it's not great as a consumer.
Yeah, you want to jump right down the rabbit hole, don't you? Okay. So I'll explain two concepts, deflation and inflation. So the dollar is a perfect example of inflation. There's more money being created than there's demand for it. So the value of that dollar is going down. Your purchasing power is, being eroded.
Yeah, more and more.
People hate that. Why Bitcoin is deflation, where your purchasing power is increasing. Both of them are problematic because both of them concentrate wealth. In the Bitcoin example, the wealth concentrates to the people who currently own Bitcoin. Satoshi has 1 million of them, so that's 5% roughly. That's owning, if Bitcoin was the gold standard across the world, then you'd have one group or individual, depending on who Satoshi is, that owns 5% of all money that exists. It's like, that's absurdity, right? So both of them are about kind of wealth concentration. Bitcoin has some other problems I don't need to get into, but I think what a really healthy economy needs is one that's stable. It's neither inflationary nor deflationary. You could price your, apple in one seed, and that would be the same price it is today as it is 20 years from now. That would be the ideal of a stable currency. But we didn't want to start off just saying, hey, we want to have this as a flat currency, because that doesn't get the network adoption. Something Bitcoin did well is it compensated risk. You need to do that in a nascent stage. Like, what's going to compel people to want to come in early if there's no benefit in doing that? They would wait until it's established. But if the whole game is wait until it's established, then it never gets established. So you needed to have some kind of way to kickstart it. So that's why we designed something to appreciate and value at the beginning, and then have this goal live point or goal stable. I wish I would have called it, where then we start the stabilization protocols to make it a steady state economy. But whilst we're building the network effect and trying to get people on board, we need to compensate risk, because there's a lot of risk. We want to reward people who are coming in early to help grow the community. So it's kind of the best of both. We said we're going to have that appreciation like Bitcoin did. And that was a great model. It grew a global economy. Awesome. But at some point, we need to stabilize it so that it doesn't stay deflationary and continue to concentrate wealth. Right.
And when is that shifting?
It's not set yet. So the community is still deciding, what metrics that are important for us to say that we have a healthy economy. But the general, idea is it needs to be a big enough network that you can use this currency for your day-to-day needs. Right now, Bitcoin's already big enough. There's already enough vendors that will accept Bitcoin. There's already enough people holding it. It could, flip a switch and say, hey, we're going to stop being an appreciation currency and we're going to stabilize now. And if it did this, then it could move to a steady state economy. And I think that would be an awesome move. But yeah, it's unknown in seeds. It depends on how fast people adopt it and how quick we continue to grow and a whole lot of other factors. So
yeah, because with Bitcoin, it's quite obvious now. It's become a store of value, and the idea that it would be the money, a currency actually is not the case anymore.
Well, right. And then I think that's why Bitcoin's getting a free pass, because it's not actually a threat to the banking system. It doesn't replace banks in any way. Imagine getting a loan for your house in Bitcoin. Okay, so if I took a loan for my house a decade ago to buy my house, I would have used, 100,000 Bitcoin at the time. Try paying back 100,000 Bitcoin today. The amount you'd have to pay back would make it impossible to ever pay back. So you can't denominate things in Bitcoin. It doesn't replace dollars. So it did take a while for the Bitcoin community to kind of understand this and be like, okay, we're not digital money, we're digital gold. Cool.
And now there's a gap.
Right. And then that...
Can you think of other currencies that actually want to be what you described?
Yeah. Recently, in the last couple of years, there's been an explosion of, crypto focused on being a better money, on understanding this.
Which would be the biggest project apart from seeds?
All the stable because they're pegged to the dollar projects.
Yeah, they're not stable actually.
Yeah. I don't even want to give them airtime, but like US Terra, for example, not Terra, UST.
UST, the
Tether,
Terra.
there it is. US Terra is a really cool one right now. It's a decentralized stable coin, and it has a variety of different...
It's kind of stable because if you stake it, you get like 20% or something. Which
that's another interesting... Yeah. There's a lot of interesting things with all the current ones like US Terra is they're still an exploitive economy. There's one class of people who own all the benefit of it, and all of them still come with fees. And then the fees go back to the rentier class is what I like calling them.
And if I keep, unless I stake it and I'm smart, but if I just have US Terra, it's going to do like the dollar. So it's going to decrease in value.
Yeah. Currently, I think US Terra and a bunch of the other ones, they all have plans to eventually, peg to a basket of goods to create a flat coin. So that's on a lot of people's roadmaps because it's really alive right now. So I do think some of these have the capacity to evolve, and they're great. We need to run a bunch of experiments. I don't think there's any competition on creating a new financial system. We have 8 billion people needing one. So I think there's a very open space.
They do good work. They're quite centralized in the decision making, from what I understand. Not in the algorithms, but in the way they create so far. And what's really interesting with seeds, I mean, you talked about the community deciding. Do you want to talk a bit about the governance of seeds and HIFA, which is, I mean, describe what's HIFA and how you can be decentralized and still be efficient?
Yeah. Well, we haven't figured that one out. The efficiency is we haven't even remotely nailed that. So that's the double-edged sword of actual decentralized governance, and why most projects aren't decentralized. They're saying they're decentralized, but they're not. They're controlled by a handful of people, but that makes them efficient, and that's why they're successful. Because if you really decentralize who's in control here, it gets chaotic pretty quickly. And so that's, what we're discovering is, how do you still organize and create efficiency without concentrating, decision-making power? Because, authoritarianism is an extremely effective, way to govern. If you have one person calling all the shots, like a lot of stuff's going to get done. Is that stuff good? Who knows? Probably not. But still a lot of stuff's going to happen.
Yeah, I was interested in concepts around fluid democracy, where you already have a reputation score with seeds. So if I join today, I don't have the same voting power as you do, right? And then there's like systems where I can probably delegate votes also, and that goes up a chain.
Yeah, exactly. So we call it ultra liquid democracy is what we're working towards, where you can delegate your voice, but you can delegate your voice based on different topics. Yeah. So right now I'm having 4 different categories of decisions being made. You can delegate a different person for each category.
Like, I don't know, for my community, like permaculture stuff. Like I say,
that model will work for that. Right now it's, we have alliances that are coming in. We have campaigns for, how do we invite people into seeds? Like we wanted to gift everyone in. So the community actually comes up with ideas to run a campaign and then votes on them. And then we have alliances, which is different organizations that want to come in and ally with us. But they also put up a proposal that the community governs.
And I was thinking maybe with NFTs, for example, if I have tokens and they have an NFT, so I know it's my name, and I delegate to someone who delegates to someone up the chain, then I could verify where my vote went in the end. Is that how it works?
Oh yeah, easy. That's simple stuff to do.
Okay.
Yeah. And it does work like that. It kind of stacks. So
feels like that could be pretty efficient, because it still rewards some, let's say, leaders and people who might be more knowledgeable. It's not like a referendum on everything.
Yeah, I mean, we're just at the beginning of that particular experiment. We're literally just now releasing the delegate feature, so you can start delegating your votes. So it's yet to be determined how that plays out. The premise is that, we can get a lot more efficient. Voice will start concentrating, but it'll start concentrating in people that other people trust. Because not everyone wants to actually go through and read proposals, but you might know someone you really trust. I think that's important, because then you can have the best of both worlds, where you can have the efficiency of small teams accomplishing stuff while it's still being completely decentralized. And those small teams are being decided by the community rather than just being decided by the sheer fact that they showed up or their founders or whatever the case was, right? Yeah. I mean, governance is a whole rabbit hole, man. But that's, the big thing, and why, I felt it necessary to do seeds anyway, rather than join a project, because I had no intention of, setting up an internet company. I was much more interested in growing food and hanging out in eco-villages, but, I needed this. And most of the projects are, oligarchical, which means they're governed by the wealthy. Same is true for Bitcoin. If I was wealthy enough to buy more miners, then I could take down the Bitcoin network. The only limitation is my money. But all the other systems are even more clear oligarchies, which is, one token, one vote. The more tokens I have, the more voice I have. How do I get more tokens? By having more wealth. Great. And especially if we attach these to our old legacy systems, if we were trying to have a revolution where we took down the old powers and redistribute wealth, like we literally just gave them a path to buy voice in the new system and control it, which is exactly what happened, which is why crypto just turned into another speculative, money gambling. And like it just turned into Wall Street 2.0 to throw money around. Like it didn't create the revolution we're after. It just, it did. It created the revolution, but it didn't create the Renaissance, right?
The regenerative Renaissance, which is what's the regenerative renaissance? Because seeds, we talk about the regenerative currency, right?
Yeah, regenerative renaissance. This is a cool term that I think we're adopting and getting behind. And I think it's an interesting time that we're alive right now. You know, if you look back in history, the medieval Renaissance was catalyzed by the Black Plague, and introducing new technologies like the printing press. So both of those came together. This massive crisis and new technology catalyzed a complete reimagining of civilization, and then the Enlightenment period kind of kicked off. I think we're seeing that same thing being mirrored today, where we've got the crisis across the globe way more now, because now it's not isolated to Europe. Now we have a global crisis. And if we don't make it through this, we have a global collapse. It's no longer just, European collapse or whatever. And we have new technologies, which is what I think Web3 is. So crypto is a part of that. And these give us radically new ways of coordinating, which is what the printing press was. There's a new form of communication to scale and, coordinate people at scale, which is what Web 3.0 is all about. If you look at Bitcoin, it uses like 0.1% or 0.1 or 1%. Anyway, an enormous amount of energy. So it was able to create a protocol that helped people completely in a decentralized fashion coordinate to consume a ton of electricity and build all these miners. We have 1 million plus Bitcoin miners in huge warehouses across the globe. So it was able to coordinate this enormous activity. I think it's a little bit of a degenerative activity to just use our rare earth metals to build miners to put in a warehouse to just run numbers. It's like, I think we could do better stuff with our finite resources. But that's not the point. The point is it was able to coordinate that activity at scale, which is really cool. So this technology, that is Web3, can be used to coordinate at scale to do anything. And that's the cool part about this renaissance, is like, what do we want to coordinate to do? Now, regeneration is where it comes in really important, because a lot of Web3 is degenerative, coordination. Like, let's, coordinate for number go up and waste energy. And it's like, all right. But what we need to do is start regenerating our planet, localizing our food systems, cleaning up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, getting off of degenerative energy production and start getting renewables, et cetera, et cetera. There's so much we need to coordinate around. So that was, Seed's focus, is how do we use this Web3 technology to scale coordination to start regenerating our planet and healing our Earth and building healthier communities. We spend $8 billion, no, more than that. Anyway, last it was $8 billion. I think it's about 10 billion on electricity fees for the Bitcoin network. Imagine if that 10 billion instead went to fund Ecovillages, which is where this kind of goes full circle. Because why we didn't get a lot of momentum on setting up Ecovillages was hard to get funding for these things. Why? Like, it makes no sense, because an Ecovillage is going to, 1, have land that's going to back it. 2, improve the quality of that land, which is going to improve the investment. Like, it's so simple. Like, why aren't we funding Ecovillages? What if we set up a protocol like Bitcoin, where that 8 billion, instead of paying electricity fees, was going back to buy up land and set them up as ecovillages? And then the network is backed by this, backed by all the regenerative land that it's holding, right? And bringing that land back into the commons. So it's not individuals owning it. The whole network is then owning it. And I think that's a really also interesting story, is like, how do we get rid of this idea of private ownership of land and get it back into commons? Well, we can create up a protocol that buys up, all of the Earth's land. And then once everyone owns everything, then no one owns anything anymore. So that's like, it's an interesting way of, freeing the Earth from this concept that someone else can own land and bringing it back into common ownership. That's a lot of ideas all at once, but
yeah, but it's super interesting. I mean, even like, I've moved to a little intentional community here, and even using terms like stewardship instead of ownership to rewire the minds around that. Do you see what you're doing with Seeds, and I'm sure a lot of other projects? I mean, Nick was talking also about Anatta, and I looked at they did a really good video series that's very aligned, at least with my vision, but I'm sure with the vision of Seeds too. And there's like a few projects. Do you see, still early, but do you see those projects based on blockchain that align with what we want to see in this physical realm? Do you see them as becoming effective and actually making the eco-villages and those communities work better than it was possible before?
I mean, it fully depends. I mean, any technology can be used to build or destroy, right? So, I mean, to answer that question, it depends on how they employ it, right? So yeah.
What's in your crystal ball?
The path that I'm on, the answer would be yes. And that's what we're focused on building. I mean, the other piece is around...
How does it look like, maybe more concretely?
Sure. So I could paint the picture a little bit wider. Seeds is a new economic system. So it's a broader thing. It's like what replaces capitalism or socialism or communism, all those isms, like those are all different economic systems, right? So seeds is a new type of economic system. What HIFA is you've mentioned it too. HIFA is a new type of organization system. So what replaces the corporation? What replaces eco-village governance, right? So HIFA is a tool for people to come together and make decisions with. So that's where I see like eco-villages are probably going to be more using HIFA's technology to govern their local community, create new types of currencies. So the HIFA set, it lets people put up roles. So in an eco-village, you can have a role as being a permaculturist. And the community's like, yeah, we actually want that role to exist. So first they're going to vote to say, yeah, we want someone who's going to be a permaculturist working, 4 hours a day to plant trees in our community. Great. All right. Do we want to use collective assets to pay for them? Yes. And that would be another vote. So then the community is voting how it wants to use its collective assets to pay for different roles in the community to serve the community. Something I saw early when I was visiting eco-villages and permaculture projects is, we coined this term permacapitalism at the time, because the concept was you'd show up to this project, you'd put in a lot of time and energy, and then you'd leave with nothing. And in a lot of cases, I was paying money to go there and work. And it was just very extractive. And everyone at these projects felt the same way, and they were burning out quickly, and they didn't have this, sustainable community. So I got a little, disheartened in that too. But HIFA would allow, someone to actually show up, participate in the community, and earn value from that community, earn a token that represents ownership of that community. So in this vision, you could show up and, be a wandering person going from eco-village to eco-village and earning shares of all these villages and potentially having more money than you came in with because you're adding value to those communities. So that's where I think is really interesting, is like how we start designing, local economic systems based off of, eco-villages and new currencies that, help support them. So in that sense, I think those tools are employed that way. It could be great. But again, these tools can be employed to, exploit people more. If a village decides like, hey, we're going to give all of voting rights to this one person and they're just going to use it to abuse people, like they can use this technology to do that. Yeah. It could say that, okay, people who bought in, they get all the voice. Investors have all the voice and everyone else is basically their indentured servants. Like I doubt people would join that project, but this technology lets that happen.
As long as you don't force people and you let people move, then in my head, those better projects would grow, be replicated, copied, and the ones that abuse it would die.
Well, that's the really, really cool part about this renaissance is it is all in the open market. So it's voluntary. If I'm born in the States, like I'm forced into, capitalism and representative democracy. Like I don't have a chance unless I want to move to another country. But even nowadays, like most countries are basically the same. Like you don't have that choice. So that's the problem. Like you have this illusion of freedom, but if we don't have the freedom to choose the very basic economic systems that dominate our lives, then we don't have freedom.
But I feel that's where we're going. I mean, it's going to take time for things like countries, but already online, we choose, for example, if I choose a crypto project, maybe I don't want to be in a crypto project where one token is one vote. Like I actually don't want to. And that's why I'll invest more in seeds than in a different type of governance that looks like that. So I feel we kind of have that freedom. Are you familiar with the Seasteading Institute?
Ooh, I got really into that like 8 or 9 years ago.
Okay, but, 3 years ago, I read their book, and they had really interesting ways where you'd have many micronations on international water in artificial island. And if you're not happy, actually because you're on water, it'd be really easy to take your home by boat and go to the other place, the other sovereign nation where you won't try out life there.
Yeah, I mean, and that's entirely what I see with this renaissance, where it's eco-villages with their own governance and economic systems, and it's as easy as moving to another village. So that might even be next door. Maybe it's another neighborhood. You can have one, especially in the suburbs of most of the world right now, each little neighborhood of those suburbs could be a totally different economic and governance system. And that's really exciting because it gives more freedom. But then also we're aligning with evolution. We're going to have a lot more diversity, and the successful ones are going to be able to expand. And what's successful here is the ones that are providing the most value to the people that are part of them. and it changes the game, because right now, like nation states, they can apply exploitative tactics. They can say, we're going to tax you, we're going to put you in jail if you don't follow. Like, if it's a free system, a village can't do that. They can't say, if you don't follow our rules, we're going to put you in jail. Like, they don't have that right anymore. So it's all about like who can attract it by providing the most value, rather than having, punishment be the main form of control. Now it's, you got to provide rewards and the right incentives and make sure that people are aligned to the mission, and it changes the way that we actually approach how to govern a collective of people.
Yeah, that's exciting. I mean, I definitely see an IFA as like those little sandboxes to things that are going to govern way bigger projects, and also thousands and thousands around the world. So that's going to be cool. I have a question on what you do with IFA and the DAO. Is there a way to kind of almost like white label it? It's like, for example, like 20 years ago, if you wanted to build a website, you had to code, and now I can use Squarespace or Wix. Can I use like a toolbox DAO where I adjust a few criteria, and so you can come to my community and be like, that's what we build, you just choose some things and you can help that use that system?
So that's what we've been working on for the last year. And literally now, the last week, we opened it up to the first groups to pilot it with.
Okay.
So there's already been a lot of communities and seeds that have been desperate for their own do tool. We call it a do, because this is how we do. Anyway, it's their own DAOs, which for people who don't know, it's a coordination tool. But so we just opened that up, but the next step for us is going to be templating it. We're going to have like, here's the best practices for an eco-village. Here's 3 different templates with different, ethics behind each one. So as people go through this process, they can be like, we mostly align to this template, so we're going to start here. But those templates are going to be really important, because when it comes to governance, there's so much that most people don't even comprehend. Like, where do you set the quorum, for example? And quorum is like how many people need to vote on a proposal for it to be able to pass. Because if it gets no movement, then why should we pass things? And it also, this is a rabbit hole, but maybe it's worthwhile. When we start getting into governance, there's all sorts of cultural things that inhibit good decisions being made. Like, we don't want to offend people, so we don't want to vote something down. Even if that something could cause harm to the community, like our desire to not offend someone might override our desire to protect the whole. All right. So that's why quorum's actually important, because then instead of voting no on something to cancel it, we require it getting a certain amount of yes support. Okay. So those quorums are really important to know where you want to put it. If you put it too high, then nothing's going to move, because you're never going to get 100% of people voting. Like, that's just not going to happen. If you put it way too low, then you're going to have a lot of problems. So you need to know where to sit that,
And then again, some people might try different things, and after a few years, we'll see.
Totally. And that's what's cool about it. Is
and also some will prefer different systems. Yeah.
100%
will coexist. There's not like one.
And every culture is going to have something different. I mean, these tools work for eco-villages, but they work for regions. They work for knitting circles. They work for companies. Like, any group coming together to do something could use these tools to do it.
But that'd be really valuable, because I tell you, for example, we're starting a small intentional community here in Ubud, and then we'll probably go to something bigger. I also have the Lightleaders mastermind. Nick is part of it. We want to decentralize the governance. At the moment, still centralized by me and a few others that make the decisions. And we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to have a place where it's more advanced than just asking a few people and taking advice. Like, having a template like this, I feel, is something that's going to be very needed.
Well, to be very clear, there's no reinventing the wheel in this space, because we're not creating a wheel. We're creating a rocket ship that's capable of traveling interstellar, which no one's done before, because it wasn't ever possible to have these types of governance systems. So like, no economics discipline has even approached it, because all of economics, it was designed before we had global instantaneous communication. It was designed before we had computer processing to be able to take complex information and put out. Like, we didn't have the technology to do this type of governance.
I don't mean you're reinventing the wheel. I mean, I don't want to reinvent
wheels that other people are making. But what I'm just saying that because you're still going to be reinventing something. So you're going to be joining the experiment.
But I want to base it on like the foundations people like you have built, rather than.
I get it. Yeah. You don't want to repeat efforts that other people have already done.
Yeah.
I just want to set expectations that we still haven't figured this out. Nobody has. It's a completely new space, and that's what's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, new ways to make decision to govern new financial systems. That's definitely a lot of a lot on your shoulders. So, but there are other projects also, and that's good to have a space, that a vibrant space of people working on that. But I definitely see you guys as leaders in that. And one example of it is, I mean, you're probably I think you're the person that the main brain, let's say, behind it. But since then, like, you've made a lot of space too for other people to feel like it's their project too, which I think is very important, because it's called the Lightleaders. And so sometimes I think about leadership. That's what I want to do for my communities too, is a lot of leaders. Then a movement is going to be so identified with the leaders that it's really hard to attract other leaders. So I feel with Seeds, then, as you said, there are a lot of challenges, but also I can see how a lot of people join the project and feel they have space to be leaders there and they're heard.
Well, I think what's important is making it so that I'm technically not the leader. You know, for one example, the last 5 proposals I've put up in Seeds have all failed. And I've been really strong that I think something needs to happen, and the community is like, nah, we don't want to do that. So I'm not a leader. I'm not in control of this, which is really cool, because it is the community governed thing. And you mentioned that, you know, maybe I was at the heart of catalyzing this, but, you know, I'm not coming up with this. So many people that have joined Seeds, they had the same vision, the same kind of download. They saw the same pictures, just like, yep, you're on the same mission. Great. So am I. And that's like what's been so awesome of catalyzing the energy here is there is no one leader. We've all see this vision. We all kind of know what to do, and we're coming together to do it. So in that sense, like, I don't think I have that authority or leadership, and I don't, and that's frustrating, because there's some parts that are like, I really know we need to do this. Like, come on, guys. But then I have to actually take a step back, and it's a different approach.
It means it works.
And it works. And you know, what's cool is there's some things I was really certain it needed to happen away, but then it failed. And then I had to go back and remodel it to like actually get, you know, consensus to make something happen. And the end result was unfathomably better than what I was trying to do. And I realized it was my own shadows and dark side and like other crap that I was bringing to the table that the community recognized and stopped. So it's working in that sense. But, you know, the dark side of this is it's slow. You know, a lot of other projects in crypto, they can move really fast because there's 3 people calling all the shots and moving it really quickly. You know, here it's like we have to take a lot of time to have dialogue, come to an understanding. But then when we do make a decision, I think it's way more grounded and way more regenerative.
Hopefully vote delegation will really help for that, because I'm part of Seeds, but I haven't been that involved. So I would much rather say, hey, I trust you, or I trust you, and you have my vote on this, you have my vote on that, because I think you're qualified, rather than asking me to vote on things I don't really have time to dig into.
100%. I think I'm personally banking on that having a big impact on how, you know, decisions are actually crafted and decided. So that'll be really fun to kind of see that happen.
Cool. I think we're going towards the end of this episode.
It's kind of all over the place. We went deep fast there.
Yeah, but that was super cool. I mean, in the end, went quite a bit on governance, but that's something I'm really passionate about. And I think for communities physically and for projects, of course, like Seeds, but also the ones I do, I want to replicate that for sure. So.
Well, and it's what I'm only really fully understanding recently is, you know, Seeds started off being like, hey, we're a currency to build a new economic system based by local food. But now I'm realizing, no, it's actually a community on a learning journey to create these new systems. So before I thought it was like the technology was the thing that was driving it, but it really quickly changed to no, the community is the one that's altering the technology and driving it. So now the most important thing isn't, you know, getting a currency that's stable. The most important thing is getting cohesion and coherence within the community. And then we're going to create, you know, way better tools than the ones that we've currently started with. Like, and that's what's really interesting is this technology allows us to, you know, completely redesign what economic systems look like. But in order to do that, we need a community who's going to use those tools. So it changed focus. And I think that's the most kind of exciting thing that I'm at the very edge of learning right now, is how important it is to have that community cohesion. And then it is all about governance. It's how do we make decisions? And then, you know, governance was a side effect. We started with money, you know, local food and economic systems, and governance is like, oh yeah, and then we need to make sure we're decentralized. Now we realized it's actually the other way around, that like governance is what's so important, because that's how we then give rise to the economic systems that we're creating. It's how we're going to coordinate setting up local food systems is the community, right? And that's only going to work if people are on the same sheet of music and they're understanding it. So then we realize, oh wait, no, governance is the heart of this. The community is the core of this, and all the tools we're building are just artifacts of that community. Not the point anymore.
Yeah.
So it kind of, flipped the whole mirror around, which I think was cool.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, for me, it really resonates. Again, with the Lightleaders Mastermind that we started very recently, for us, the most important, that's why I ask a lot about decentralized governance is, okay, how do we make decisions there? Because, we can have good ideas on creating a social media platform, doing this, on doing a coin, a token, etc. All that's going to tie it together and bring the magic is how we collaborate together, right? And so even when I talked about the projects to some friends who I think a little bit in the old paradigm, they were like, okay, but what are you going to do? You bring people together around values, and you have experiments around how you decentralize governance and create tokens like a mastermind. Yeah, you have a few things, but and a lot of it was like, well, we have some kind of roadmap, but through the events we do, through the masterminding, we'll get more clarity. So then, of course, it's a balance because you still want to have some kind of momentum and some vision to start with. It's like, at least for me, it's been balancing having some kind of vision and common ground that people can be like, okay, yeah, that attracts me. It's not just a pure blank canvas in a way, but having enough trust in the process that I don't really know where it's going.
Well, so I'll explain what the Hypha tools work a little bit on the governance side. Because when something's small and nascent, it's better if 2 or 3 people are calling the shots, especially if the community is only 5 people anyway. So how Hypha works is voice is distributed through a contribution. So who are governing it are the people contributing to it. And if only 3 people are contributing at the beginning, they're going to have the most voice. But what happens is as the community matures and more people are contributing to it, the voice decentralizes over time. Yeah. So it's a pathway towards decentralization. It doesn't start off having, 10,000 people and just giving them a voice and expecting, emergent good decisions to happen. That doesn't happen. And everyone attempting that is just chaos. Instead it's, people are coming together, they contribute, they earn a voice through contributing. And then voice starts concentrating those who've contributed the most. But on the back end, we could have all sorts of cool tweaks. In Hypha, it's the all voice has a 1-year half-life. So all voice has a 1-year half-life. So that means is that all the voice you earned last year, by next year, you have half of that. So it doesn't concentrate all the voice into the early founders. Yeah. What it does is, in effect, everyone is made equal after 4 years. So if I've been here for 8 years and I've been contributing at 100% my time and I'm earning the same amount of voice as someone else who's only been here 4 years, we would have relatively the same voice. Okay. So it doesn't concentrate in that 8 year. That 8-year person's not going to have double 4 year, right? Yeah. I think that's important because then it passes it off to the next generations and it makes sure the voice is still really fluid. But in this sense, voice is always held by the people who are contributing the most. And then, the assumption is, and that's worked out pretty well so far, is that people making the decisions are the one who are contributing the most, which means they're most connected to it, which means they should be making the decisions, right?
Is that easy to quantify on chain though, and to automate?
All of this is automatic.
Yeah, cool.
So this is the DAO part of the do is all of this is tokens. It's no person's managing it. It's fully decentralized. If it happens, it happens. It doesn't require anyone to
how long until someone like me wants to use such a template, let's say, and can leverage that?
Well, that's what I was saying. We opened that up just now. So we're starting, we're bringing in, I think, maybe 5 new projects. We're going to let them start using these tools. I say let them. Anyone could take the do, and if they have technical understanding, you could fork it, white label it yourself, and run with it. But people who don't have the technical understanding, we have to support them right now until we build the widget that you get to walk through it and make all your tweaks. But right now we're learning what all those tweaks should be. So we still don't necessarily know what all the communities want to tweak, what to hide behind the scenes and what to make sure is right front and center. So that's what we're learning about right now.
Yeah, I'll apply.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'll send you the application link. I'm not running these ones, so someone else is going to pick if they want to play with you or not.
But that's the thing. I don't have the privilege in that new paradigm. I can't have the privilege of being friend with Rieki, and so my application goes up the top.
It's clear at this point I don't have that much, effect or influence.
Yeah, if I knew.
Just another member here. Which I love. I mean, that's how we set it up to begin that way, you know, it's to make sure that it's run by the community and in every essence it is today.
It's so exciting. I mean, I could feel in myself to have been talking a lot about the project and really, really wanting it to succeed a lot. So, yeah, I encourage everyone to get involved with Seeds.
I mean, if you want to, I mean, again, I think the biggest feature right now are for people who want to experiment with creating new economic and governance systems. Like if that's exciting to you, if you want to be at the forefront of this, if you want to like be tweaking how we're making decisions and how the economy ought to operate, like awesome. So it's still really in that like early adopter phase of people who are just geeks on this side of things. Other people who are just wanting a better than free currency to make purchases with, like, sure, come around, hang out in the community, say hi, but it's probably better to wait a little while until that's more mature.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks so much, Rieki.
Sure.
Well, you could probably tell I was quite passionate about these topics. It's
Yeah.
really of interest for me. So thank you. And I'm sure many people who listen. And I want to acknowledge you for like being consistent at wanting to build that new paradigm, having done a lot of exploration and sharing with me and the people who listen. And always making sure that it's done in a fair way and that provides for everyone. So thank you so much, Rieki. Do you have a last share for the listener, and also how people can join Seeds and how they can follow up after that?
Sure. Yeah. I'll just send you all the links. So just click in the show notes and that's all the ways to get involved if you want. My ask though is to plant a garden, start growing your own food, start having a relationship with your food again. I mean, that changes everything, because if we start getting more nutrition, then we could start thinking clearer. We start having a deeper relationship with Earth and hearing what Earth actually wants for us. So it's, that is, I think, the big catalyzing effect is reestablishing our connection and relationship with Earth through food. Is going to be the source that really fuels this Renaissance change. So, if you're looking for one thing to do, if I could ask of you, is to go out there and set up a garden, put seeds in your mouth, like imbue them with your DNA before you plant them, like talk to them, start having a relationship with them. It's fun. And it's deeply meaningful.
Thanks, Rieki.
Thank you for holding space and all these conversations, and it was a wild ride that we went on today. I wasn't expecting that. So it was fun.
That's how you like it. That's what you asked.
Exactly what we show up here for. So thank you.
Thank you for taking some of your precious time to listen to this podcast. If you stayed until the end, I assume it was insightful. So if you like this podcast, please share with friends. Remember that if you tag us in your Instagram story at the Lightleaders podcast, we will repost. Tell us what you've learned. You can also leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Now, if you want to stay posted about new podcast releases, especially as we get censored more and more on big tech platforms, make sure to join our newsletter and our Telegram. You'll find the links on thelightleaders.org, and feel free to contact me directly too, whether it's for feedback or potential collaborations. Thank you again, and let's co-create the conscious new Earth together.